Hey, this is Daria, and today I want to talk about networking. On this channel, we're discussing all things tech, career development in tech, and tech news. I'm a product manager. I've been working in tech for the past 8 years, and if you are in tech or want to get into tech, you have probably heard about layoffs. Every time I go on LinkedIn since early 2023, I see at least one person from my network announcing that they got laid off and that they're asking for help from their network. Naturally, I started thinking about a scenario: what would I do if I were to get laid off? Thankfully, my company has been very stable and safe. I'm not worried about that. We haven't had any mass layoffs, but I see what's happening around me, and it is quite concerning. So I started asking myself, who would I call if it were to happen to me? I have a decent number of contacts on LinkedIn, and I always thought that I had a lot of people that I could connect with professionally and seek help if I needed to. So I went into my LinkedIn, started scrolling through the contacts and seeing what the people that I would reach out to are up to these days. First thing that caught my attention was that some of my former bosses and colleagues were laid off as well. Some of them still searching for a job. The second thing, the people who remained where they were when I met them. The companies are simply not hiring, or at least not the product roles. So if I were to look for a job today and reach out to those people, they'd probably be willing to help, but their companies are not hiring right now. And just a quick reference to my first video on YouTube that I published, the worst tech jobs to get into. Product management was one of the jobs that I specified there because, as I said, the structure of the development team is such that there is usually 1 PM per one team, or sometimes even 1 PM per two development teams. So it is quite normal for companies not to be looking for a ton of PMs. And the third thing is that about 10% of people who could become my potential leads have actually switched careers entirely. So the best thing they could do is perhaps help me with a referral. And by the way, I think that referrals are extremely overrated. I think they help you a tiny little bit, but unless that referral is going to the hiring manager and the person referring you knows the hiring manager, can put in a good word for you, I don't think that referral is going to help you much. One last thing, I would not consider cold applying on LinkedIn as my main search tactic in 2024, 2025. As far as I remember, according to the recent data, I'll check, either the response rate or the offer rate is actually 1% from cold applying. So to me, cold applying is a bit of a wasted effort. I would probably still do it like 5 to 10 minutes a day, but I would not be counting on cold applications, at least not right now. Which brings me to my point. How do you find a job and recover from a layoff fairly quickly if you were to lose a job right now, or if you already lost your job? Of people I know, the ones who were able to recover quickly were usually the people who had a very strong network and were able to land their offers and were able to land solid offers through their network. So how do you build a network that can help you when you need it the most? So just a quick fact about me, I had never been big on building network until late 2023. I would consider myself an introvert or an ambivert. I love people, I like helping people, but I'm not a very social type of a person. I don't like loud places, I don't like parties very much, and it is really unnatural for me to put myself in a group of strangers, walking around and making connections and adding them on LinkedIn, hoping that they would help me or that I could help them in the future. I always considered that nature of relationship to be very transactional, and I always tell myself, well, I'm not that. I appreciate deep, meaningful conversations. I am not the one who's going to be jumping from one group to another, just introducing myself, pitching myself, and then leaving the event. But then again, when I was looking at the list of my LinkedIn connections, I realized that if something were to happen to my career today, and if I were to lose my job, I don't have a lot of people that I could reach out to who could help me with a job fairly fast, let alone thinking about the long-term strategy for your career, finding a mentor, finding someone who can help you build a very logical career path that will lead you to success in a fairly short period of time. I had no idea how to network. I did not know how to even start a conversation, what to ask, how to join a little group, which events to go to, so on and so forth. So I want to share all the lessons that I learned from my networking journey since late 2023 because I think it has been quite successful. I've been able to make approximately 200 high quality connections on LinkedIn since late 2023 as I've been putting a lot of work into my networking strategy. And if that number doesn't sound too big, it's just 200. I personally think that that is actually a lot more than I thought I would make in just 1 year, because it is 200 real people that I built a certain level of relationship with, that I can comfortably reach out to, and I know they will respond, and I know that they could potentially help me. I can help them when they need me, and they can help me when I need them. So it's not just a contact on LinkedIn. The number of contacts you have on LinkedIn does not equal the number of high quality contacts you can reach out to when you need it. I feel very good about that number. So I want to share some of the tips that I learned along the way that could help you build a high quality network in a fairly short period of time, coming from somebody who had never done networking before, was incredibly scared and uncomfortable starting a conversation with a stranger, and especially asking them for a favor. So tip number 1, know that everybody is scared when they start doing it for the first time. But trust me, after 3 or 4 networking events you're going to go to, you will get very comfortable talking to strangers. It's just that barrier that you have to overcome. I don't have any tips for you as to how you can suppress that fear. I don't think you can. You just take that fear with you and you go. You have to make that first step. It is probably comparable to dating. When you go on a first date, everybody's scared, but you just have to do it. This is very similar. You're not alone. Everybody's scared. If that makes you feel better, then there's that. Number 2, don't be afraid to get ignored, because you won't get ignored. People who gather for professional events, everybody understands that they're there to network. I have never met anyone who would be just outright rude to me. And if I were to approach them, they'd be like, no, I don't want to talk to you. Never happened to me, never happened to anyone I know. I think it really comes from a very primal fear of being rejected. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm not going to talk about the fears that we all have, but I remember being scared of being rejected when I was first going into those events. I thought nobody would want to talk to me, nobody would want to listen to what I had to say. Why would they even talk to me? I have nothing interesting to say, I have nothing interesting to share. So just know that that is not the case. You will not get ignored. And it could be because people are polite, but I don't really care that other people are being polite or not. Even if they're not ignoring you, just out of politeness, that's all you need. You need to get rid of that fear. And if it comes from somebody who is talking to you just because they're being polite, so be it. The first couple of times, not a problem, as long as you talk to somebody. Number 3, do not feel bad about being transactional. Everybody is there to make good connections, and introducing yourself to somebody in order to exchange some information or connect with them about a potential job. Those people are doing the exact same thing. Maybe they're not talking to you about those things, but they're definitely talking about it to someone who stands right behind your back. Number 4, how do you actually start a conversation with a stranger? Let's imagine that you are at a networking event. You're getting into a room full of people, you see those little groups, and you're probably thinking, what do I even say? How do I get into at least one of those groups? What if I interrupt? What if they find me boring? This is actually very easy. You quite literally come up to that group. Usually, maybe not every single group, but a lot of those groups have little openings. Get into that opening, people start noticing you. And instead of being awkwardly silent, where you just like standing and staring at them, waiting for them to say something, and it's just awkward, you go, hey guys, may I please join you? That's it. Or you can also say, hey guys, I overheard you talk about X. I'm really interested in that topic. May I please join your conversation? That way, you're not really interrupting anybody because you're asking for permission to join. You're being respectful while getting what you want. And what do you think they're gonna say? No, you can't? People who enter conversations and look really awkward, and are usually the ones that others do not want to talk to, but still do because they're being polite, are the ones who just step into the circle and don't say a word. That's when it gets awkward. Because if you think about it, if you are actually part of that group and you see a stranger who just entered the conversation and is just standing there staring at you, you're waiting for them to say something, to at least introduce themselves. I realized that the best strategy is to enter a group with a question. When you're asking them for permission to let you in, people feel like you acknowledge the fact that they were there before you introduce yourself, and now you're a part of the group. Number 5, when to show up to a networking event. This may be a little bit controversial, but I find if you think about a networking event, there are 2 points in every event where you would get the most value out of it if you enter one of those 2 points. Number 1, if you show up at the very beginning, and I actually think that it's quite efficient if you know the attendees, and if perhaps you've been eyeing somebody, you know the person, or you have heard of the person who's going to be at that event, and you just want to be there in advance to perhaps catch them as early as possible and have an opportunity at a one-on-one chat. I have done that when I personally go to professional events. I look at who's going to show up, and if there's somebody I'm really interested in, I would make sure to show up, and I'd be very open about it. I'm not a stalker, I'm very open about it. I'd say something like, "Hi, I'm Daria. I noticed your name in the list of attendees, and I just really wanted to have a conversation with you because I noticed on your LinkedIn that you did ABC, or you work at ABC, and I really want to talk about something. I've been looking forward to seeing you at the event because I believe that we can connect about something along those lines." I feel like when you're being really honest and sincere about your intentions, and rather than coming up and pitching yourself to somebody very aggressively, being transparent and sincere about your intentions, people are very much inclined to respond to you and be friendly with you, really. And the second point is actually quite late. So let's say the event starts at 7 o'clock. So typically, I don't know how the culture is in different parts of the world, but like in Canada, for example, not a lot of people are going to show up at 7 o'clock. Most will probably come at like 7:15 to 7:20. So what I would do if I know that I'm running late, instead of rushing and trying to get there by 7 when I know I'm not going to be able to, I would rather take my time and arrive at 7:50. It's not a rule or anything. It's just something that I personally find efficient. Most people show up at 7:15 or 7:20, and they start making kind of their rounds and talking to people who are at the event. Again, it also depends on the size of the event. I'm not talking about big tech summits or conferences. If it's a fairly small networking event happening locally, within 40 minutes, by 7:50, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's a point where most people have already met each other, and now they're kind of struggling to find what to talk about. Of course, there will be some groups where the conversation would be very active, but in my experience, that like about 50 minutes after the start, or about an hour after the start, that's when people are like, okay, what else do I do? Where else do I go? Who else can I talk to? Like they're looking for something fresh and new because they've been talking to either the same group or the same number of groups for a certain period of time by that point. I find it really efficient when you enter the group at that time, because you are going to be that fresh meat, and they're like, oh, someone new, I want to talk to them as well. So that is, again, an observation, and it worked for me. So I personally recommend it as a tip. Tip number 6, I think, how to choose a networking event. When you're just starting to network, I recommend that you go to as many events as possible. There is going to be a point where you'll understand the kind of events that you will not want to attend anymore. Again, sounds pretty obvious. With me personally, it was actually quite unexpected, because there was a group that I joined for product managers, and I thought that that would be a great group for me specifically because I am in product, but I actually stopped going to their events after the 3rd event. And the reason for that is because they typically have a very hyped topic, like how to build AI native products, like something along those lines, something that they know people are interested in. And they would have a 30-minute lecture, and they would typically invite a director or a VP from a tech company, and those people would give a half an hour lecture about a topic. It would be incredibly high level. The Q&A part is just miserable because they're not really answering the questions. The questions that are being asked are quite deep because people want to know more, they want to learn from them. But because they have 30 or 40 minutes, the answers aren't really very helpful. And then after that, you have a room full of PMs who went there because of the overhyped topic, and those people aren't really specialists in that topic. So it's not like you're going to be networking with subject matter experts. And the executives who were presenting the lecture would actually leave right after the presentation. So in my experience, those events were not helpful to me at all. There would be a ton of people that are just trying to get into the industry who only want to get something from you. I stopped attending after the 3rd event. To sum it up, if you're just starting, go to every single possible event that you can get into. Over time, limit your choice to events that are really valuable and the ones that are not just based on topics that are just getting a lot of hype. So that was A. Now B. Closed groups, paid groups, smaller venues, community-based, and smaller ticketed events. Those are my favorite. As I also mentioned in my first video, there is a barrier to entry. My absolute favorite is Lenny Ratchitsky PM community. Lenny is by far my favorite product management creator on LinkedIn, his Substack, and his podcast. Probably the biggest thing that I appreciate about him is that he has a closed community for the newsletter subscribers. It is only available to people who pay for the subscription, and then they add you to a Slack channel where people can meet, organize events, and connect. Every city I travel to just for leisure as a tourist, if I can attend Lenny's event, I do it. I did it in Denmark. I did it in the US, in multiple cities in the US. I did it in Germany. I did it in Sweden, and I'm doing it very actively in Toronto. And the quality of people that this community has is just outstanding. It is hands down my favorite community of all. Every event you show up to, you're going to be able to find someone really valuable. I've met friends, I've met very good contacts through his network. Lenny himself, through his content, does a lot of research around product management, product-led companies, how certain products become viral, what's kind of the mechanism behind every single one of them, career development, things like that. So I find that the people that you meet at Lenny's events are really nerdy, but in a very good way. You can have a very meaningful and productive conversation with probably the entire group when you go. If you're in product, I highly recommend Lenny's community. Number 7, what do you do if you are an early career professional? I would say that you should concentrate on intermediate to senior people within the community that you're about to meet. So for example, if you're a junior product manager, I highly recommend that you network the most with intermediate and senior PMs. If your primary goal is to find a job, those are the people that will be able to refer you and recommend you to the hiring manager. If you're looking for advice in your field or to get some feedback on your work, you can talk about that as well. And even though it may seem like you don't have much to share and you're just talking about your little things while they know so much more than you will actually be surprised how much people are willing to help, because a lot of PMs are going through similar struggles, and it's a great opportunity for you to learn from their mistakes. And lastly, don't feel like nobody is interested in you because you're an entry-level specialist. My biggest realization from my networking journey is that oftentimes you come to an event and you think, oh my God, like I'm such a nobody. What am I even gonna say? I remember being at this event in New York and the majority of PMs were FANG PMs. I work in a very big company, but it's not FANG. I remember showing up and thinking, oh gosh, they're probably gonna be looking at me and thinking, what are you even doing here? It's funny because it ended up being one of the best events I've ever gone to. People would be so interested in talking to me just because I was that fresh meat. And my biggest realization was that in my mind, I was like, they have nothing to gain from me. Like, I have nothing to give them. Why would they even talk to me? They ended up being the nicest people I could have ever hoped for. Tip number 8, what not to do. Please don't start the conversation by pitching yourself to a stranger. I see plenty of career coaches on LinkedIn actually encouraging people to do that. Starting a conversation saying, I'm so-and-so and I'm doing this and that. Just bluntly pitching yourself to a person in front of you. I also feel like this is a common mistake for beginners because oftentimes they're simply too awkward and they don't know what to say. So they're just trying to fill in that silence with something, and they talk about themselves just to be like, you know, hey, I'm worthy of being here. Like, I have something to say. Listen to me. I don't think it's because the person is bragging or anything. Sometimes it's just really because they're awkward. They don't know what else to say. But if you think about it from the person who's listening to you, from their perspective, imagine if you were the one listening to that pitch from somebody. When you hear that, you really don't know what to do about it. You're like, yeah, okay, you've done this and that, and you're so knowledgeable and smart and experienced. Okay, cool. How can I help you? What can I do for you? Like, you really don't know where to take that conversation, and it becomes really awkward. So I highly encourage you to be very organic when it comes to building a relationship with people professionally. Your openness and sincereness is actually gonna give you a lot more opportunity to create a connection with people a lot faster. With my last tip, I want to emphasize the importance of networking. And if you don't believe me, I encourage you to talk to people around you that are a lot more successful than you and who have a lot more zeros in their bank accounts. If they open up to you and tell you about their career journey, I can put money on the fact that the success that they got to was probably due to not only their skills and talent and hard work, but also very strategic and high quality networking. Networking makes you future-proof. Networking takes time. I highly encourage you to do it continuously. You don't want to be in a situation when you start doing it when you feel like you're about to be laid off. You want to be networking continuously, because those relationships, those coffee chats, that organic relationship building, it truly takes time for people to trust you and be able to refer you and be able to hire you confidently. They need time to get to know you. If you're thinking about networking when you have already been laid off, it's a little bit too late. It's better late than never. But if you are in a position right now where you're not worried about losing your job, get into networking so that you can have that peace of mind going forward and you're not going to start panicking if something were to happen to your current job. If you have any strategies that made a massive difference in your career that I haven't covered today, I would love to hear from you. Please comment below. For now, thanks for listening. Till next time. Bye.